Okay, welcome. Good morning. Thanks for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is James Moore. I'm with IBM. I'm an offering manager in our management and platform hybrid cloud space. We have a really great panel today, and that are great fits for the topic, which is really about enabling digital transformation and how it impacts IT ops and operations in general. So I'll do a quick introduction of our panel, and then I'll let them elaborate on their roles and their company. So we have Danielle Malinowski from CenterPoint, Dominic Lehr from OpenAdvice, and then Danny Butler from Consolidated Communications, and Chip Chambers from GmbH. So what we'll hear some different stories from our panelists about their experiences in operations and operations management in general, but specifically about how there's been some transformative projects that they've experienced. And we'll get into some of the lessons learned, but really to benefit you on, give you some ideas rather of what the challenges were, what they did to overcome them, what the benefits were and the plans going forward. So why don't I give the panelists a chance to introduce themselves, and we'll start it from there. So Danielle, you want to go first?
All right. Super fun to always go first. I'm with CenterPoint Energy. We're based in Houston, Texas. I'm going to do my best to get these numbers right. We recently acquired a company, so we've grown a bit. We have about 14,000 employees and about 7 million metered customers across our footprint. We do electricity in 2 states and natural gas, residential natural gas in 8. And then we have energy services in 40 different states throughout the US. Myself, I'm the manager of integration solutions. We handle mainly the retail electric market transactions. Texas is in a deregulated electricity market, and so it's fairly complex, and it's all custom written code. So I'm happy to share a little bit of our journey today and how we're managing that.
Yeah, I'm Dominic, working for OpenAdvice in Germany, and I got a bit of a different perspective because, as I said, we're a business partner of IBM, so I'm traveling around at different customers, so I see different customers making their move on the digital transformation, and I'm very happy to share that with you today.
I'm Danny Butler with Consolidated Communications. I've been attached to the NOC in some form or fashion at Consolidated for over 20 years. When I started, we were a small mom and pop telephone company in 3 cities in 1 state, and now we're in about with our recent acquisition last year of Fairpoint Communications, we're in 22 states and I don't know how many cities. So we've grown astronomically in the last 20 years. And like I said, I've been in the NOC most of those years, and I've seen a lot of transformation, which is relevant to this topic. Probably more than I care to see, and I'll probably see even more than that. So that's me.
My name is Chip Chambers. I'm with GmbH. GmbH is a software and a services company that's a premier partner with IBM in the IT service management space. We've got a product named OpCenter, which is tied directly into that space and augments some of the functionality. Like Dominic, I see a lot of different environments, so working a lot of different projects at a high level, and happy to share that information today.
Okay, great. So, you guys can feel free to, it doesn't have to be in any specific order, but we could be free-flowing. But just to touch on the topics of, the transformation you've seen in IT ops at your respective companies, and even, things you can share that, that about your colleagues and that are in similar industries or similar companies or elsewhere, and how you've seen that change over just the past few years. And then if you want to touch on some of the top business drivers and problem areas that were really the catalysts behind some of that transformation, that would be good too. So whoever wants to jump in.
Maybe I'll jump in because
Okay.
I got actually 2 different perspectives to provide, and One of them was like 3 years ago, was a very founded, typical German telco company where we tried to implement some, can you hear me by the way?
We can't hear you.
Right up to the,
Okay, like this?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So it was, as I said, it was a traditional company, very founded, very old people, don't get me wrong, and we tried to implement some agile measures, and it was kind of hard for them because, you know, they were used to their traditional model where they use waterfalls and they write plenty of pages and thousands of pages before they get anything done. So it was hard to actually transfer them, and what we learned it's more important not to focus on the technology itself. It's actually more important to focus on the people first and make them stand behind you if you try something like that. Whereas on the other side, there was a recent project we did last year. We did some sort of a visualization component, and it was very different because the company itself was focusing on the agile measures. So they were really actually driving us, and they said we want to do it that way, and we were going to see quick wins. And at the end, it was like 2 months project, and everybody was happy. So it really depends on the culture that you're working with, and I think that's a very important part, because if you go to the upper levels, like the CTO level or something like that, they see the technology and they hear about cloud and they want to go cloud, but you know, they have to make sure that the people are behind it.
So we have kind of a similar story, and our CTO is sitting in here, so I won't make any of those age discussion topics, but we have very standard waterfall methodology at CenterPoint, and I've had the fortune of working in several different groups. So my first manager role was in the PMO, and then I moved to our monitoring and automation team, and now I manage an app dev team. And one of the things that happens quite a bit in the retail electric market are changing regulations, and so there is a list that we call the hot list, and they are development items that need to be fulfilled for the market. And it was kind of a perfect fit for a continuous delivery model. So we started down the road of, we have Urban Code Deploy in place now. One of the issues that we used to have was getting other teams involved in our deployments. So I would have to line up a database person and a web engineering person and a security person, and now we're actually able to do all of that. So in my very first staff meeting this year, I had one of my employees ask me, so are we finally going to go to the release model where we're doing releases once a month? And I lost a little bit of my composure, and I hit my hand on the table. I'm not super proud of it, but said, no, we're going to go to doing a release a day. We're not waiting for these releases. So he's absolutely right. Overcoming the culture is probably one of the hardest parts we've had. We've been successful in the fact that we are now seeing about a 50% reduction in manual errors associated with deployments. So that's been a big win for us overall.
My perspective may be slightly different. I have the luxury and benefit of not being in IT. No offense to any of you IT folks in here. I'm on the operations side, and we don't use terms like waterfall. We don't use terms like agile. We use terms like chaos, and that's what we've always been managing through. My team doesn't operate under capital budget. We always operate under OpEx, which means when the capital runs out, we still have work to do, right? We don't have the luxury of saying, oh, there's no money, so we can take a break. And the way it's transformed over the years, when I first started, we had like depreciation schedules of like 10 years, so we'd order a piece of equipment, and we could pay for it over the course of 10 years, and you would expect that after 10 years that equipment would be retired and gone. So unfortunately, we have equipment in our networks that's 40 and 50 years old, still providing service that we have to monitor. But on top of that, as you're all aware, the technology is changing so dramatically. Today we depreciate on a 5-year schedule, but in 1 year that equipment is obsolete. And so we're deploying new equipment. This has the same function as the old equipment plus some new functions, and we have to monitor that. So it's a very chaotic environment. And how do we start monitoring and perform fault management on all these devices? When I first started, fault management was the customer when they would call in. Now we want zero call resolution. We want to tell the customer they're having a problem before they are even aware that they're having a problem. And so we've had to leverage tools that IBM and partners help us to, or provide for us and help us to deploy. And again, since I have a small team and I don't have the luxury of coming up with 400-hour LOEs and I have to deliver results immediately, I have to rely on vendors to help us out.
So I would agree with both sides of that conversation. I think it is cultural, but I also think it's technical. And some of the new technologies that we're seeing with cloud and with virtualization and with analytics, AI, machine learning, all this is starting to come together where it's making a very dynamic time, because most companies I'm seeing do want a cultural shift. They're not necessarily sure how to go about it because they've not done it before or recently. And they know they want to take advantage of the value in the new technology. So that's some of the value that we try to bring, doing that repeatedly. And I really think that's the value that the customer can get most out of us, more so than expertise in the individual technologies, more so than expertise in how to go about and do transformation, but actually the experience. Having done it multiple times before, understanding the pitfalls and helping drive that down a path where you can get the value out of the technology that you're looking for and make that cultural shift, so that you've transformed your business into a new way of going about it.
Thanks. Just curious, a show of hands, for folks attending here, who would consider their organization to be more traditional waterfall? Okay, we're not going to hold you to it. I don't think the camera can see you. And what about agile, more dynamic? Okay, all right. So definitely, you know.
And what about the rest? They didn't put up the hand.
Yes, both. Okay, so that's can be even more of a challenge, right? Where you have some groups, depending on how big your company is, you might have some groups operating through one culture, one methodology, and another, in a more traditional waterfall one. Yeah, we've seen that a lot. I know you guys have probably seen that as well. So, Danielle, you mentioned some of the business drivers, I think, and some of the changes. What kind of teams were involved, and how is that still changing? Are you is it more of a structured, central, IT-driven culture, or is that becoming more of a DevOps and spread out?
So if I'm being honest, I went a little rogue with my DevOps journey. My team needed to do it, right? And so at CenterPoint, we have people who are leading our DevOps and Agile moves throughout the company, but we just couldn't wait. And so a couple of the account team are in here, and I know they're going to giggle, but I made them call it something other than DevOps as we walked through it, because there were some people who were adamant that, that's DevOps is something you can buy, and it's not, right? So we pull our business people in. They have a very close relationship with us and have actually been moved into our organization. A few years ago, we stopped calling ourselves IT. We call ourselves technology operations, and we brought a lot of our key business partners, especially on the electric side, into our organization under our CIO. So one of the main things that we're seeing is that as you go through it really is a natural cultural progression. It takes a little bit to get people comfortable with not having all of their requirements up front and delivering small bits instead of huge deployments. But we tried to do it in the most natural possible evolution. So I think that making it feel normal made it not seem like a change to our business. So they think it's just the way we operate instead of that we've tried something new.
So psychology as much as culture there.
Yeah, I was about to get on that as well. You may call me the esoteric guy, because that's what I've been called at our company, but what I see, if you bring DevOps together, you always have some sort of a clinch between, on the one side you have the development guys that want to bring in new features as quick as possible, whereas on the other side you have the operations, and you might know that, which want to have a very stable system, and that for as long as possible, because they are charged on how stable the system is, where the other side is charged on how much new functionality they get in. So I think there's a natural clinch, but at the end, you have to find your way through it and maybe walk the middle way.
Yeah, we don't use the term DevOps, although that's what we're kind of evolving to that pattern from an operational standpoint. All of our products and services now are becoming more and more virtualized. So we're offering like SD-WAN, cloud secure products, and so all those very rapid turn up, and it's not enough to just start delivering the service to the customer, but we also have to start instrumenting that service so that we're getting good metrics and fault reporting on it, and all that kind of blends into this DevOps life cycle that our products are starting to evolve towards.
So I do think DevOps is a part of the evolution, and I agree with what everybody's saying here. I think we're seeing the same thing on a pretty repetitive basis. Different environments are set up to adopt more quickly. Some environments are a little bit more of a push, and really what I see is it's the age-old conflict, right, between IT and operations. I don't see that going away anytime soon. We've seen different companies try to address it in different ways, bringing the two teams together, making them part of the same organization, tying them closer to the line of business. We also see a lot of companies that are still very much separated, but have tried to establish more of a process to bring those together as a part of the DevOps rollout. Some people see DevOps being a single person per product, if you will. Others see that being a process where you're tying two complete organizations together. So I don't know that I've seen a real clean definition across the board of DevOps and a way to implement it. I think it's malleable enough that you can apply it to your business on what makes the best sense for you.
Yeah, good point. I think sometimes the semantics really are just, they could be advantageous to have some common lingo, but they could also, have a stigma. So it's nice to just hear some of the stories that you just did things without having to get stuck on some of that. And it sounds like there's been a mix in the experiences you've shared so far of whether it was a top-down driven effort versus, I don't want to say bottom-up, but not quite at the top, but driven from on the ground and, in a pragmatic way, especially what you shared, Danielle, where you just did it, right? But how far can you go with that until you have that upper level management sponsorship to be successful, or is it almost the reverse, right, where you just want to make sure you change the culture from within?
So I actually think it can start either way, right? It's going to depend on the business. It's going to depend on the industry you're in. It's going to depend on the personalities within the business, right? Who sees a problem that they want to address? Who sees things are working just fine? Don't change it, right? Not to get into the age conversation again, but I think it can start anywhere, right? And I think that once people start seeing the positive reaction to it, it doesn't matter what you call it. It has a tendency to grab a life of its own.
Yeah. Okay. And then some of the other things. So you all mentioned some of this. So what were some of the biggest pitfalls and obstacles besides we covered the cultural aspects and some of the psychological aspects, but maybe touch on starting points that were really where it was really challenging to either remove yourselves from it or remove the teams that you were working with from it, and crossing the gaps to where you're trying to get to, either technically or process wise.
Yeah, I think the easiest was if you start on a greenfield. The project we did last year was somebody had an idea to do something, and they wanted to do this as quick as possible, so it was no discussion on how we would implement it. And by doing that, it was very easy for us, to show quick wins. And if you show quick wins, then you get everybody on board, and it doesn't matter what level it is. It's just the outcome that counts at the end. So from my perspective, I can only talk about greenfields, and yeah, that was kind of easy to do.
So, go ahead, Jim.
Well, and I was going to say is I think the major roadblocks in the beginning are political and organizational, And once you get past that, if you can find common ground, if you can find a project that you need to turn quickly, and you show the value of being able to turn it quickly and make progress, the rest of it kind of falls in place.
So I live a little bit by the principle that you do it and ask for forgiveness later, which has worked fairly well, but where we have some obstacles is just around, as we operate within our own team, it's not a problem, but starting to get our governance processes to align with what we're trying to do, to be able to get things through more quickly. I'm not talking about your governance process, Steve. I can tell by your face. It's not you. As we're trying to do things more quickly, our project management office and our portfolio management group, they're expecting things to be done a certain way, and we need it so much faster. We didn't start with greenfield projects. We started to apply these principles as a necessity for projects that were already in place. So we're currently working on a project. It'll end up being about a 3.5-year project, and our CIO came to me and said, you have to figure out how to get this code in faster and at a higher quality. So, of course, I punted to my account team and said, you need to figure out how I can get my stuff in faster and at higher quality. And that's been successful. So now the CIO has been able to see how we've sped up the development. My team was the one, of course, that was behind, and we were the long pole in the tent. And now we are not. So to be able to show that success has been helpful, but getting there and getting some understanding of what we're trying to do, because it doesn't feel comfortable, and getting through some of the roadblocks that are purposely in place have been a little bit of a challenge.
Our challenges have primarily been cultural and political, both in terms of bargaining agreements with union employees. And especially when we started an initiative to automate as much as we can, the fear is, hey, you're taking my job away. I've been typing this command the same way for 30 years. Well, you've been doing it wrong for 30 years, and we can do it faster, right? So we tried to avoid those discussions and show them the value of automation and give them opportunities to do more rewarding and more important work than just typing a command over and over again, cranking out widgets. So it's still a challenge. I'm not saying we've cracked the code yet, but we're continuing to decode it, I guess I could say. It's getting better. We've still got a long ways to go.
Okay, great, thanks. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on, what, for each of those things that you mentioned where you overcame the cultural issues, what were some of the specifics about that you can share about those projects that you actually did? Were there some measures of success within milestones? Were there ways that you got people to get on board and progress further and help shape some of the mindset there?
Well, I would say if you're new to automation or beginning to automate, it's important to come up with KPIs. One of the things that we would do is we would sit and watch technicians when they would do these things manually, determine how much time it took them to do it, and we would include those calculations in our automations, and so you can report in terms of dollars saved. And that's even beneficial to the union employees because they see, we are saving the company money, and I'm helping in that process. So that's a good one. Always try to instrument what you're automating so you can report on it and do that cost-benefit analysis.
I've also been through a rough patch with the automation part as we are trying to sell runbook automation for the past 3 years, and been quite successful in that. But the problem always is the fear that somebody thinks that something's going to be taken over by a system. And I think what helped on our side is that their life gets actually easier, because instead of typing a command somewhere into a console, they just push a button, which means they don't need to use their brain that much, which gives them more free space for anything else. Could be something personal, something more that they could educate on, read on. It just gives them more valuable time that they can use for better things, to make it simple.
The best way we've handled that is allowing those folks who are afraid of losing their positions to automation is we ask them what they dislike about their job, right? So we pull a certain user group into a room, and I inappropriately refer to these as what sucks. So we pull them in and we say, what part about your day is awful? What do you not like to do? And we've had instances where somebody will say, well, every morning it takes me 15 minutes to do this. And then we'll figure out a way to automate it. And that person has 15 more minutes, and I'd like to say that they're probably doing something great, but it's probably being reallocated to water cooler time, but that's fine too, right? Because it helps morale, and they're not doing what they feel is a menial task for those 15 minutes. Overall, through automation, at least in the year that we had a very focused, metric-driven project around automation, we found that we were able to automate approximately $1 million worth of human time at the keyboard that could then be reallocated to more capital activities. And that's important in a utility because we can't recover cost of operational time. But if we're working on capital projects, we can actually make some recovery. So it's good for the company, and it's actually really good for our employees to be able to learn new things through projects as well.
Yeah, I would say it's additionally important. Fault management, network operations is not really revenue generation, it's revenue loss, stopping that loss. And so proving to executive team that, hey, we're saving the company money, it's actually making the company money. And tools help do that. A lot of people just want to see things in spreadsheets, but when you can package it in a nice fancy dashboard and executives can see that, it just kind of proves the benefit of the network operations team.
So I think, I do think showing some of the success, also I think showing some of the failures with the metrics. The key is to get the KPIs derived up front and instrument them. Because if you don't instrument them over time, they're going to fade away. And even when the project's over, checking back on that a year later, check on that 2 years later, and understanding where you've continued to improve, where you've got that continuous improvement going, and where that's stalled, or where you start to see that deprecate. It points you back into taking a closer look at that old project, right? Making sure that that project doesn't need to be refreshed, or understanding that you're continuing to improve and you're heading the right direction. I think the biggest mistake that most environments I walk into, there are no metrics, right? They're so busy working on the day-to-day, or they're so busy firefighting, nobody stopped to benchmark, how many people they have doing what. I do think that getting buy-in from operations, the guys that are doing it, is key, right? So the stuff they don't like to do, or the stuff that makes their environment a little bit better on a day-to-day. But I also think that can be rewarding, going through and doing little things, letting them name the tool, letting them putting their name as a part of it, or authored by, et cetera, gets that buy-in. So once you start getting that community built and you start seeing the progression, and those guys start seeing those metrics that you've instrumented, they get that value of success, and as well as a sense of ownership. And once you've got that, it kind of takes on a life of its own.
Yeah, so that that brings up last question I have, which is really, you mentioned a couple of the tools, so runbook automation, and I know there's some others that are inherent there. Can you elaborate on some of the things that really, the tools that you put in place that stood out that were involved in all of this?
So before Danny talks to you, so I really think the future is going to be around, in the management space, it's going to be around analytics. I think that's the next untapped resource. Those of us that have been in the space for far too long, has spent a ton of time collecting data, gathering data, writing reports on data, and never really taken full advantage of it. I think the next frontier is the AI along with IA, right? Artificial intelligence along with intelligent automation. Whether it's runbook or some other technology, but the ability to go through and drive automation off of what you've been able to derive and make that repeatable is going to be key.
Yeah, I've been a consumer of tools for all of my life, and I'm not being paid to say this, but NOI, NetCool, has probably been one of my favorite tools. I learned early on that it takes two things to maintain a NetCool environment, and that's an engineer and a German Shepherd, and the engineer is there to feed the German Shepherd, and the German Shepherd is there to keep the engineer out of NetCool. So it's been a very stable environment for us, and it's allowed us to have confidence in that tool so we can focus on other things. And in addition to that, we have a pretty significant investment in NetCool, and we can continue to leverage that while we're using, like the Op Center product that Chip had mentioned earlier, things that kind of can plug into that framework and help us to be more efficient and provide those metrics and identify automation candidates. It's been very useful for us.
I kind of see myself as a German Shepherd right now, not because I'm from Germany, but we implement those solutions at NOI, like you mentioned, for the past 10 years, at least what I'm doing. And yeah, I mean, once you have it in place, it basically runs forever if you don't break it. And by don't break it, keep the engineer off the keyboard most of the time. But on the other side, I think it provides just great value. You already mentioned you have dashboards in place that you can build up to make bad things look good. Like if you're a critical alarm, it's red, but you can make it look pretty. So yeah, at the end, all the tools they provide value, and I think lately runbook automation was a great addition to that portfolio, and it really helped our customers to save time in terms of working on issues or helping them. Like you said, what sucks. I got a funny example on that one. That there was an environment which was kind of special at the customer, so they can't copy paste stuff in. And by using runbooks with a push button automation, there was no need to copy paste something in anymore. So that helped them really a lot, and they were quite happy about it. Whereas on the other side, like new things, the ASM is coming in very quickly, and I think that will also help our customers to drive all kinds of data that they have somewhere stored in silos, and then visualize them on a dashboard and give them the overall picture that they are looking for the past, I don't know how many years.
The Agile Service Manager. Yeah.
So NetCool and Predictive Insights have been instrumental for us, but that's kind of old news for CenterPoint. But we did that, how many years ago, Mark? 2 or 3? And we were able to prevent 72 critical failures last year using Predictive Insights. But for me, because I'm the one up here, over the last year, actually since the last Think, the biggest impact we've had has been with the urban code stack. So as I have said, I manage a team of developers. I probably didn't say how many. So we have 8 full-time people, and I have about 60 offshore resources who are playing around in my environment at any given time. So being able to package all of that up and promote things through our environments has been an enormous savings for us. That's probably been the biggest transformation for my team, is the quality and time improvement in using the Urban Code Deploy and Urban Code Release tools. I will also say, since our CTO's in here, I would now like to have a German Shepherd, and I'm going to need to bring that through governance next week.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? We have a little bit of time. Okay, I'm going to come down. Sorry for. There you go.
Good afternoon, good morning, actually, whatever time zone you're on. I'm Dana Stevenson, I'm with Wells Fargo. I'm an infrastructure architect. And one of my questions actually is around data redaction. We have a hybrid environment, we have automation, we have DevOps. But one of our challenges that we face is, how do we secure that data that we're bringing to our lower environments to automate our testing, particularly around PII or EHI data? Any of those compliant regulatory, that information, what tools do you use to redact that data?
A Sharpie marker, and that's not really relevant to, we don't share the data. We try not to get it out, so it's
Okay.
not relevant for me.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else want to try to answer that one? No. Okay, here's another question. Or you want to answer it? Here you go.
My name is Victor. I work for Express Scripts, and we have a very large database comprising of PHI and PII data. So basically what we do with our data, we have different tools that we have in-house, but we are mainframe folks, so it might not be possible for everybody to understand, but we have data de-identification that we have from CompuWare, and that de-ID the actual data, and those data, right, per governance, we have to de-ID it and move it to our lower environments. There's no questions asked. We have several fields that we de-ID, and those fields are downloaded to non-prods, and those are the data that we share to everyone to use every cycle or every agile or every stuff that we have to do testing.
Okay, any other questions? It's a quiet crowd today. Okay, any other final thoughts, panel, before we depart? Any other final words of wisdom for all the folks that, we do have another question for folks that raised their hand. When was that? Water.
Danielle's problem.
Here you go.
The other three individuals, because Danielle's brought up that she's in one environment where she can control, where she can do the CI/CD aspect on hers, but other projects aren't, and they're the waterfall aspect. Do y'all have that problem where you're kind of a mixed hybrid environment? Is it an 80-20, 60-40? Do you see people kind of migrating to the CI/CD, or is it just, we'll just live with it?
I think it really depends on the environment, right? There's a lot of different factors that go into it, from back to political to cultural to organizational. I haven't seen a situation where I wouldn't move to be more agile. I think everything will end up there in the next few years. I think you've got some fast adopters, and I think you've got some guys that need to, the show me state kind of a conversation where they need to see it first. But I haven't really seen anything where it didn't work when it was applied properly.
I feel your pain, brother. I mean, it's a challenge. Like I said earlier, we're chaotic. We have some groups that are agile, and then for the most part, all of our IT enterprise group, they're waterfall. And we're okay as long as we never need IT resources. But when we do, then it's the weakest link in the chain, right? So we can't do things immediate anymore. We have to wait on long LOEs. So that's another code we haven't cracked. And I think we are getting better, and it may be 5 or 10 years out. I'll probably be retired before our organization becomes fully agile. So I hope it's not that bad for you.
I think it would also become a mixture of both. I mean, if you look at the traditional waterfall people, maybe provide them the user stories up front so they can read them, and maybe do not do that many releases as you would probably like to do. But if you mix things up and then do regular stand-ups where they give you the feedback on the stuff and just involve them, I think there's nothing written in stone. If you ask me, if you look for the transformation stuff, so at the end, it depends on the people, depends on the company, depends on the product.
Just kind of humorous story here. Some of our IT folks thought they were agile when they moved their waterfall method into Jira, right? So make sure that you communicate that no, that is not agile.
Yep. So I had one other question. In this transformation theme, have you guys received any push to push tools into cloud? Whether that's virtualization, put it on VMware, or actually in containers is probably what I'm interested in too.
We actually had a customer where I thought was the slowest moving customer ever, but at the end it was the first who actually moved their whole data center to AWS. They have basically virtualized servers where they're running their whole network environment on, and I was kind of impressed by that. So that was coming from the customer saying we need to move it there, but at the end, it's a virtualized data center on AWS.
All of our stuff is cloud, but it's private cloud, and we've been trying to Jedi mind trick the organization into moving it into public cloud, and so we start incrementally, like with systems that require lots of storage or lots of processing power that we don't want to leverage our systems on. So like net flow collectors, we've been successful, getting the company migrated towards that path. And once they're comfortable with that, then, they're willing to push more and more things into the cloud. So it's kind of a long process, but it's a positive outcome.
We've had a little bit of difficulty, especially in the app space, getting people to really accept virtualization. But the way we've overcome it, at least working with the architecture team, is asking for their requirements rather than their expectations for hardware. So we have a guy who said, we absolutely can't be on virtual for some reason. And so instead of saying, what kind of server do you want, we just ask, what are your compute requirements, so that we can make that decision for them. And so that's how we've gotten a little bit around that hurdle.
Okay, great. Well, if you have other questions, that we'll be able to maybe answer them outside. I know they'll probably shut us out of here, but I really appreciate everybody coming and the questions and engaging. And thank you very much, panelists. And have a great rest of the week.